Hello and welcome to the Mill Creek View CEO Special with me, your host, Steve Abramowitz, where I interview the best business people and entrepreneurs. Hello and welcome back to the Mill Creek View CEO Special with your host, Steve Abramowitz. We are focused on the best business doing good business in America. Today we are with J. Bradley Hall. But first, for more information about the CEO Special or the Mill Creek View stable of podcasts, visit us anywhere you get your podcast or videos at Mill Creek View. While you're there, please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode of the amazing content and pass it on, and thanks for doing it. Brad is a founder and C-level executive who has launched and nurtured fintech unicorns in 30 plus countries, offering real-world insights and guidance into monetizing disruption. Brad has deployed disruptive business models, challenging outdated and often vulnerable incumbents across cultures and geographies, including the CIS, Asia, EU, North, Latin, and South America. Brad has orchestrated $2 billion plus in raises, multiple listings, and successful exits, and is now based in Dubai, looking east. Icon Capital Reserves SA was established in 2013 to empower ultra-high net worth and family office private clients to create, trade, and reserve value using gold and the blockchain. Icon is built on a foundation of security, discretion, and trust. The company is fully invested in future-proof software and encryption to create Orioles, trademarked, a fusion of gold and the blockchain that insulates holders from currency, institutional, and systemic hazard. Icon has established successful private client relationships in Europe, Asia, GCC, CIS, and the Americas, excluding the US, for several years. The Icon Secure Exchange platform was initially built with the colored coin protocol of the blockchain and has been updated now, offering Orioles, ERC20, and Centimini, ERC721, as smart contracts on Ethereum. Innovation is in our DNA, and you are only as good as your next success. Icon is one of the handful of strategic partners of Hedera, and early in 2019, the company will be launching Orioles on the Hedera Hashgraph platform, which provides a new form of distributed consensus. The platform is lightning fast, fair, and secure, and unlike some blockchain-based platforms, doesn't require proof of work. Brad, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Steve. Great to reconnect with you, and certainly appreciate that intro. Happy to be here.
Brad, you and I met quite a while ago. I know you've dedicated thousands of hours to understanding the market of money. Full disclosure, I was an early investor in GoldX. Tell us why you chose gold, what we are told is a barbaric relic and should be ignored as your medium of value.
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's obviously very topical because it's top of mind for most families now. If you think of the creators and the custodians of intergenerational wealth, those that are not just trying to speculate on the value of a token or trying to make a quick return, but are actually thinking about how to protect their wealth. Well, traditionally, they've been allocating 10% of their portfolios to gold. Now, where this is a little bit different is in the West, where I'm Canadian. I spent many, many years in the US, as you know, Northern California and Silicon Valley, and then, of course, Southern California. And subsequent to that, living and working in 30 countries around the world. And, in the West, we kind of think of the S&P or the Dow. That's how we're thinking about money. And that's an extension of the US dollar as a reserve currency. But if you travel around the world, if you're in China, if you're in India, if you're in the CIS, countries like Russia, if you're in Indonesia or Malaysia, or here in the Gulf, I'm sitting in Dubai tonight, it's quite a bit different. Gold is part of the DNA. In their mindset, gold is how you store value and money is how you transact value. And so what we did is we just came up with what we describe as a fusion of the world's oldest store of value. And really that's been a kind of a de facto or a default for 6,000 years, and that's gold. And we married that to encryption technology, distributed ledger technology, and we created, as you mentioned, the Oriole, AU Real, which is basically gold money. So we've done that based on research back to Babylon. And so The conversation usually starts trying to gauge somebody's understanding of what money is. And candidly, it's not the wealth that may have been accumulated by their grandparents or their parents or themselves. It's something quite different. And so when you begin to understand the genesis of money and what it represents, gold has always played a significant role in that throughout history. And the only place it's really been absent has been kind of in the West, where it was illegal to own gold in 1933. And in fact, that stayed the case until I think 1975. And in fact, the dollar was supposed to be exchangeable with gold. And in 1971, Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard and eliminated that convertibility. So really, for most of the world, gold has been money. It's the Western mindset that sometimes just needs a little education.
Wow. How have the uber rich and ultra high net worth individuals taken to the idea that dollars or their home currency like Swiss francs or euros are worthless and gold is their better choice to store wealth?
Very topical question. And certainly, as you know, I think you and I met probably close to the genesis of Icon, in what was that, 2013, 2014 in Cafayete in Northwest Argentina, where certainly not known for stable currency. And subsequent to that, as we were building out our solutions, I would travel and keynote family office events. I'd do 8 to 10 events per year, typically 2-day events, and would do the keynote the first day at 9 a.m. or what have you. And when I began describing this pending fusion of encryption, distributed ledgers, and gold that would represent future money, I mean, a decade ago, people thought I was from another planet, and they were pretty sure I completely lost the plot. But when I would come back the next year to the same event, and then to the next year, and the following year, all of a sudden it began to resonate. And some of the themes we were discussing, a decade ago, the emergence of BRICS, and how ultimately the real barometer or benchmark would be when the petrodollar, which was launched in '73 to clear and settle, oil trades coming out of KSA in return for military transport, when that would come under duress would sort of be the tipping point. And we're now seeing that. And so the reaction I get now is not, wow, did you just beam down from the Enterprise? More so than, how did you know? How did you know this was coming? And really, it was just a study of economics, a study of history, a study of cycles, complex financial cycles, and trying to anticipate what was coming next. And so in many ways, what's happening now has been baked in for a while and almost inevitable.
Inevitable. What would happen to the commodities market that trade globally like oil and food, unlike, say, natural gas? And is there enough gold on Earth to fund everyone's everyday needs?
Great question. There certainly is enough gold, but what is going to affect the variable is going to be the price of gold. So if you think of, the total value of derivatives, and basically all derivatives it means non-assets. So if you take an asset and you rehypothecate that asset, it becomes a derivative or it becomes debt. So if you have underlying property, you've got your house. The minute you put a mortgage on the house, that's a derivative of the asset. You've added debt to the underlying asset. Now, mortgages become securities become derivatives become tradable, instruments. And right now, the estimate is there's about 5 quadrillion of those floating around that are debt. Now, the GDP of the world is estimated to be 100 trillion. I mean, I think that might be optimistic. The real number might be 50 trillion. So that means you've got 50 trillion of production, which is, typically asset based or asset backed, supporting 5 quadrillion in debt or derivatives. And so at the end of every complex cycle, that debt needs to be paid or it needs to be written off. And so we're going to see a significant part of that written off. So let's say at least half of that is written off. That's still leaving you 2.5 quadrillion against 50 trillion in GDP. And so how do you reconcile that? Well, what's used over history is the price of gold to settle that debt. And so that means that you multiply the 50T to get to the 2.5 quadrillion. and you've got 50 times. So it could conceivably take a 50x repricing in gold in order to settle all of the outstanding debt. 50x at 2,000 an ounce means you've got 100,000 an ounce gold. Now, what is the final formula going to be? Will half the debt be written off? Will half the debt be cash settled? Will it be 40%? Will it be 60%? That's beyond my pay grade. And there's parties that are trying to figure out what those ratios are. But gold is certainly not going down. That's a certainty. So if it goes up by an order, our calculations when we game theory this are that the repricing of gold will be somewhere between 20x and 200x. And somewhere it'll find a clearing range where the price of gold will settle in there. And then these debts will be written off, and then we'll start a new cycle. And when we begin a new cycle, we always start with gold. So yeah, we're going to see sort of a once in our lifetime, a generational opportunity here to participate in the in the end of the current debt cycle and the beginning of a new asset-based cycle. It's really, if you study history, and like I used to think, my God, if I was around at the start of Weimar, imagine the dynasty you could have created. And yet here we are, we're right here, right now. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a once in a generation opportunity to participate in the repricing of gold and subsequently the currencies that will increasingly be gold backed. For example, our Orioles are 100% gold backed. We will see countries that will be partially gold backed, maybe 40%, maybe 50%. I think we'll also see the emergence of gold reserves coming back. Gold in the ground. You think of where I was born in Canada, they don't have any gold reserves in the central bank, but they have a lot of gold in the ground. So we'll see a way to monetize those reserves where you'll have tolling agreements and mining companies won't be nationalized, but they'll have one buyer, which will be the central bank, and they'll use that as a reserve to kind of clean up their balance sheet. So yeah, interesting times.
Well, if the U.S. were to lose the reserve currency status, what would the world look like?
Yeah, very, very good question. And just to illustrate that, for example, what we do, we're working with the top 5 soy producers in Brazil, and their customers are Chinese. So they're pricing soy production grown in Brazil, and Chinese buyers are clearing and settling using dollars. Now, the Chinese don't want to use dollars. The Brazilians don't want to receive dollars. And so what we have been proposing for some time is, and it's now gathering steam, is, well, why don't you clear and settle your soy in Orioles? So instead of pricing it in dollars, price it in Orioles, which each one represents a 1 gram weight and measure of gold. And so if you take away the USD and just replace it with an Oriole, that's what we've been working on in terms of a trans-border settlement currency. Now, because of the technology that we have evolved over the last 10 years, and it's really evolved quite dramatically. When we started in 2013, we built on top of something, as you mentioned at the opening, called the Colored Coin Protocol, which was built on top of Bitcoin. Well, we could clear and settle 4 transactions per minute, and the cost was in 20 to hundreds of dollars. So it really wasn't commercial. As we evolved a bit, we met the guys who were launching Ethereum, and they were able to improve transaction speeds to 15 transactions per second, which is, of course, a quantum leap ahead of 4 per minute. But when you think of, something like credit card technology, Discover Card launched in, 70 years ago, and credit cards today can process 1,700 transactions per second. So, you're not going to disrupt the payment system with the technology that's operating at 1/10 or 1/100th of the speed. So the breakthrough for us, the quantum leap forward, was our affiliation with Hedera. And we finished that build last August, in August of 2022. And we can now put through 10,000 transactions per second at a cost of 1/1000th of a penny. So we now have commercial speeds, and we've lowered the cost down to commercial grades. So what we're able to do is we can move any quantum of Orioles anywhere in the world, and they will clear, settle, and be irrevocably registered in less than 1 second, all without going through a bank. And so what we can do is I can literally send from my computer to your computer there. I could send you 100 million worth of Orioles, knowing that it's fully gold backed, the gold sitting in vaults outside the banking system. And you're going to receive the Orioles with settlement done in less than a second. So it's a very efficient way to store value, but it's an even more efficient way to move value around. And now what we're focusing on is building out the infrastructure to make that available to everyday users, sort of on your phone, where you can use this as if it's almost like a bank UX or a bank interface, and adding all of that sort of utility and functionality that it really allows us to become a currency.
All right, ancient history. Aristotle defined money as the first two forms of exchange are natural and unnatural. Is cryptocurrency unnatural?
I think, of the 30,000 tokens that are out there, 99.9% of them are counterfeit. They're ledger entries, right? So there's no value. Now, having said that, I was living and working in San Francisco in the original, what they call V.1 of the web, which is the original .com days. And you may recall, or maybe it's before your time, but I'm an old silverback here. So I remember, pets.com going public at $6 billion valuation and then being out of business 6 months later. And, we were investing in all these companies, and there was a tremendous wealth creation cycle where you had to have that kind of mania that was creating wealth and drawing attention to internet-based companies. And eventually that capital found its way onto the, balance sheet of Amazon, Google, eBay, companies like this. And so in the crypto space, we've had kind of the same thing. We went through ICOs and we went through all of this Turkish bazaar of, these offerings that were based on nothing and going to the moon, and creating a somewhat of a wealth factor, which, that was the IPOs of the 90s, exactly the same. But eventually that capital is going to find its way onto the balance sheets of serious companies. And that's our ambition, is to be one of those companies and that are going to change everything. And so my answer is twofold. One, I think most crypto tokens today are counterfeit, and they're ledger entries. They're claim checks with nothing to claim. Having said that, I think the promise of distributed ledgers and the ability to create immutable records that can only be updated by consensus, and the value underlying can be exchanged in a less than 1 second anywhere in the world, that's obviously going to change the way we think about how we store, create, and trade value. So I would say distributed ledger.
Well said. Very good. He also said, being wealthy consists in using things rather than in possessing them, for it is the activity and use of such things that make up wealth. How does Icon or Orioles help with this kind of wealth or ability to use it?
Yeah, great question. And we agree wholeheartedly. If you can underpin value, then you can establish trust. And so I'm often asked, what do you guys do? Are you doing blockchain? Are you doing gold in the blockchain? Are you creating money? Is it this tech? Is it Web3? I say, no, we actually do one thing, and that is we sell trust. And as command and control hierarchies, which is the centralized hierarchies that dominate politics and organizations and money, implode under their own bureaucratic weight, what emerges is a decentralized architecture that will allow you to transact and replace value. Now, if you're decentralized, it means the emphasis on trust is actually magnified. And so we use a neurobiological chemical reaction in our brains, which we interpret as trust, and we use heuristic defaults in our guts based on our experience to tell us whether we should trust something or not. And so as we move forward at the end of this cycle and into the next cycle, what we do is we provide the trust layer and put the underlying value into vaults that are non-bank vaults around the world, including our Swiss vault, which is inside a mountain with a data center and a private airstrip, very 007. And we do that because you can now use Orioles and understand that there's inherent value, there's intrinsic value, and that allows us to convey trust, which is the latest iteration of technology. It's all ones and zeros. So we've taken business processes, we've converted them to digital, we've taken telecommunications, we've converted from analog to digital. Now we're converting finance completely to digital. And the next thing is establishing trust. And what we offer is a version of digital trust that's fully gold backed. And the reason we use gold is because it's been the heuristic default for 6,000 years. It just is. And from our perspective,
So how does Icon make money?
with Orioles, what we do is we charge a 3% velocity tax. And so when an Oriole moves, that's an upfront fee. Now, 1% of that accrues to Icon's treasury. It's not altruism. We're doing this as a business. 1% is allocated to our distribution partners. And 1% is accrued by our charitable foundation, which focuses on nutrition, education, and opportunity for kids. And so what we have is a foundation that's endowed into perpetuity with a self-generating mechanism for funding. So it's 3%. Now, that's transparent. We're also offering the Orioles through an ETF type tracker, which is 0% load, 0% management fee. That's been issued out of Switzerland. It'll be listed, available on Bloomberg, for institutional investors. And what's interesting is that our discussions with many of these BRICS countries that are coming to us and trying to figure out what sort of model they can deploy, we say, well, we've spent a decade developing this technology. It's now fast and cheap, and the architecture's in place. And we're not trying to sell this to you for billions and billions of dollars. In fact, we can donate it to your country and we'll split the velocity with you. So we'll take 1% of the transaction fees, you take 1%, and 1% we agree will be donated to charity. And that charity will be used in your countries to provide, for kids. And that's a very compelling model for the people that we're talking to. It's resonating with them because it's not usurping their underlying mineral wealth. It's actually encouraging them to keep more of their mineral wealth locally and just share the transactional costs and fees that we can generate with us. And it's pretty cool.
Excellent. World changing. Absolutely. Well, Brad, we are at the end of our time here. I could go on for hours. Please tell everyone where they can find out more about you and invest in Orioles.
Well, the website is www.icon.gold. And our focus right now, we're building some non-custodial wallets, which is just a nice way of saying ultra secure bank-like wallets where you'll be able to participate. Those should be available before the end of the year. For our friends in Europe, primarily Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Austria, and Germany, the Oriole ETF tracker will be available through Bloomberg and traded on the Vienna Bourse, and that's all approved. Prospectus, everything's done. We're just negotiating cornerstone investors for that. So look for that probably in October. And our U.S. distribution strategies, as you know, the last significant remaining friction is in the U.S. marketplace for what we do. And that's, because the CFTC is asserting dominance and they're, taking on the SEC and what have you. So we're talking to our smart legal friends about, feeder funds and how to participate in the Swiss fund through Cayman and different offshore structures. And then ultimately, I think we will end up acquiring a banking license in the U.S. and we'll do it distribution, through a regulated entity. And that's all coming. But once you connect with us on our web presence, there's a chance to kind of sign up to keep updated, and we'd be happy to keep you apprised of what we're up to. But it's a fun time, interesting time.
Well, good luck. And this is not a recommendation to buy or sell securities. This is informational only and something that's game changing. So I want you all to be aware of it. And thank you, Brad, and good luck. And stay tuned for my book of the week. And welcome to my book of the day segment, where I tell you about a book that I think you'll like and could help you in your business. This time actually relates to our guest, The Ascent of Money, A Financial History of the World. Neil Ferguson follows the money to tell the human story behind the evolution of our financial system, from its genesis in ancient Mesopotamia to the latest upheavals on what he calls planet finance. What's more, Ferguson reveals financial history as the essential backstory behind all history, arguing that the evolution of credit and debt was as important as any technology innovation in the rise of civilization. As Ferguson traces the crisis from ancient Egypt's Memphis to today's Chongqing, he offers bold and compelling new insights into the rise and fall of not just money, but Western power as well. That's it for this episode. Really hoped you like it. End of season 1. If you like what you heard here, be sure to check out our other shows, the Mill Creek View Tennessee podcast hosted by me, Washington hosted by Vincent Cavallari, and Florida with Kat Stansel, where we always have an interesting guest making a positive change in our world today. And please subscribe to the mcview.us website, where I am editor-in-chief, and thank you for doing it. Until next time, this is your host, Steve Abramowitz, CEO of the Mill Creek View, signing off.